I'd like to make a start, if I may, if that's okay with you. On behalf of the EATAW 2017 Organizing Committee, I'd like to welcome you all to the 9th conference of the European Association for Teaching Academic Writing. It's really wonderful to see so many of you here today. And to formally open the event, we'll have a very short address from Vice Principal of Royal Holloway, Professor Rob Kemp, followed by a few words from John Harbord on behalf of the EATAW board. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rob and then afterwards to John.
Thank you, Silke. As Silke said, my name is Rob Kemp. I'm the Deputy Principal of Royal Holloway, University of London, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you delegates. I understand you number well over 400 from 47 countries across the globe. It's rather warm. It's unseasonably warm, you might say, in the UK, but we're hoping once the door shuts that the air conditioning will kick in and it'll be a bit more comfortable for you. Anyway, as Silke says, welcome to the 9th Biennial Conference of the European Association for Teaching Academic Writing, hosted by our very own Centre for the Development of Academic Skills here at Royal Holloway. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the university, I thought I'd kick off by just saying a few words about our history and perhaps I'll outline a few of our main attributes. So where do we start? Well, our origins can be traced all the way back to 1849. And don't worry, I'm not going to go through it year by year. But in 1849, Bedford College was set up, based in central London, and it was established as the first institution for the higher education of women. Now, Bedford merged with Royal Holloway in 1985, and Royal Holloway had itself also been set up as a women's college on this site in Englefield Green in Surrey, very close to the Queen's residence in Windsor Castle, in 1886 by the entrepreneur Thomas Holloway. And it was officially opened by Queen Victoria, and those of you who had a chance to walk around the campus, you'll see the statue of Queen Victoria, who bestowed the title of Royal. Now, Thomas Holloway was a rather interesting character, and his marketing and selling of a motley collection of pills and potions for every known ailment was so successful that he became an incredibly rich man. Fortunately for us, he invested part of his fortune in the college, and notably one of our landmarks, the spectacular, eye-catching Founders Building that continues to captivate staff, students and visitors, and is frequently used as an iconic location for TV shows and films. Basic Instinct 2, the 2013 Christmas edition of Downton Abbey, and more recently, the Marvel blockbuster Avengers: Age of Ultron, have all been filmed on this campus. True. Returning further back into our history, in 1900, Royal Holloway became part of the University of London Federation, and in 1965 began to admit male as well as female students. And as I said, it merged with Bedford in 1985, and today we have more than 9,500 students studying programs across 3 faculties: science, arts and social science, and management, economics and law. These are mainly based on this campus, although we do have a much smaller centre in central London. In addition, we have over 1,500 students across the world registered on distance learning programs and several hundred business degree students taught by our staff in Singapore. Over the next few days of this conference, I hope you'll enjoy residing, working and socialising on our campus, which, as you can see, is in the midst of a substantial redevelopment. And our primary conference venue, this Windsor building here, sits at the heart of the campus, across from the historic Founders Building, which, as I said, is a symbol of Thomas Holloway's vision to expand the educational opportunities available to women in the late 19th century. In that tradition, we continue to develop our historic estate to provide a 21st century campus that meets the needs of people studying and working in the university today. The brand new Emily Wilding Davison Library and Student Services Centre, just across the way here, is due to open late this summer, is named after a Royal Holloway alumna, one of Britain's most famous suffragettes. Now in the 21st century, Royal Holloway still strives to uphold the ideals and vision of its founders and visionaries, seeking to provide a high-quality education underpinned by excellence in research to all of our students. Now, higher education in the United Kingdom is, of course, facing many challenges. Tuition fees have risen. Caps on the numbers of students an institution can recruit have all been removed, all resulting in a much more competitive environment, higher financial stakes for students, and real changes in their expectations and requirements. And the results of the National Student Survey, completed by all final year undergraduate students in every university, have become increasingly important, feeding the league tables and more recently the more recently implemented Teaching Excellence Framework. When this conference was first planned, I should imagine that few of the organisers imagined that Brexit will become a reality. We don't really know how this will affect UK universities, how it will influence how United Kingdom higher education institutions work with their partners across Europe, or how European universities will adjust to engaging with UK academia. It will clearly have an impact on UK students studying in EU countries, and of EU students studying in the UK through the Erasmus exchange agreements. All in all, this is a period of great uncertainty, complicated, of course, by the recent general election results, with many questions as yet unanswered. But looking beyond the UK, according to the 2015 European University Association report, Trends in Learning and Teaching in European Universities, the main challenges faced by European universities are centred on three areas: economic crisis, migration and demographic changes, and changes to information and communication technologies. Now, the response by many universities has been a shift of strategic focus to widening participation, enhancing employability, improving the quality of teaching and learning, and also changing modes of learning, a distance blended learning. The report also highlights internationalisation as being recognised by many as a positive influence on the quality of teaching and learning. Yet at the same time, it notes that the approach to curriculum and examination has not radically changed in many of our universities. And the way we teach, of course, is dependent on the students who come to our universities. When these change, our teaching must adapt. And the way we measure the impact and effectiveness of our teaching is also changing. The increasing emphasis on quality of teaching and learning impacts on all levels at which universities operate. For example, the way staff who work in units such as writing centres or educational development centres work with academic departments or faculties. Also, how teaching and learning is structured, where it sits, and how it's supported by institutional strategies for teaching, learning, employability and inclusivity. The establishment of the Centre for the Development of Academic Skills, or CDAS, in 2014 represents one of Royal Holloway's responses to these shifting realities, encompassing a range of services for students, including pre-sessional and in-sessional conversational and academic English language provision for international students, and academic writing, communication, exam support, and maths, statistics, and numeracy support for all students. CDAS's role and expertise is widely regarded throughout the institution, and its remit is obviously very pertinent to the European Association for Teaching Academic Writing, and is central to this year's conference theme of Academic Writing Now: Policy, Pedagogy and Practice. So, once again, may I welcome you all to Royal Holloway. I hope you have a successful and enjoyable conference and enjoy the warmth of Surrey. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. And John is next.
Oh, I was supposed to get my own slide, wasn't I? Do I just advance it?
Oh, I do it for you.
There we go. Good morning. It's very nice to see you here, to see many familiar faces and many new faces. I fear there are rather more new faces than familiar. That's not a bad thing, but very good thing. This, as Rob mentioned, with more than 400 people participating this year, this is the biggest EATAW conference ever. We've never hit the 400 mark before. When Silke sent me the figures, the breakdown of different nationalities of participants who are here for these 3 days, I was momentarily a little bit disappointed when I saw that more than half of the participants registered for the conference are from English-speaking countries. But then I looked at the figures more closely, and I thought, actually, this tells us a different story. We have got 135 participants from English-speaking European countries. But we've got 170 participants from European countries where English is not the official language. That's more than we had at the entire number of participants that we had at the first conference in Groningen in 2001. That's a pretty impressive number. Out of those, a very considerable chunk, nearly a quarter, are from EATAW's founding countries. When EATAW was founded back in 2001, it wasn't founded by people who were teaching writing in English. It was founded by people who were teaching writing in other languages and who wanted to come together and to exchange ideas and learn from each other. And those countries, Germany, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Belgium, there's a lot going on in the way of writing in those countries, a lot of it in original languages, some of it in English. And if you're not familiar with what's going on in those countries, it's well worth attending some of those very good and professional presentations that I know we're going to see this year, having seen many of them in previous years. So, you know, if you don't know much about that part of the world, go and find out. There's about another 60 people coming from other European countries, countries where perhaps you wouldn't have expected very much was going on in academic writing. And contrary to those expectations, there actually is rather a lot going on, particularly when it comes to some countries that are perhaps not so well off. There's a lot going on, but not everybody can afford to come here as far as London, unfortunately. So, you know, seize that opportunity to go and find out from those people what they're doing. We've also got about 25% of the people registered who are colleagues who are joining us from outside Europe, who we're very pleased to have with us. Of course, the majority of those are from North America, and that's a very exciting part of the world as far as writing is concerned, with the longest traditions in teaching writing, particularly writing in the first language. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of worthwhile presentations from North American participants. I always remember when I went to the United States, I had a lot of burning issues that were concerning us in writing in Europe. And I thought, why aren't the Americans talking about these issues? And then, after I talked to people for a while, I realized they were talking about these issues 20 years ago. They moved on to something else now. So, you know, there's plenty of expertise there. Make the most of that. Much cheaper than having to go all the way over the Atlantic to find out about it. And of course, the vast majority, the biggest group, of course, are people who are from this country. No surprises there. I'm very happy that we can be in Britain, that we can tap the very considerable expertise, particularly there is in second language writing in this country. So those are going to be a lot of interesting presentations that you're going to be able to benefit from as well. So I'd suggest go and see the things that you don't know so much about. Surprise yourself. The EATAW community has come an awful long way since 2001 in Groningen. As I say, There are a lot of familiar faces. There are people who are with us since then. There are a lot of people who have joined us. For some of you, this will be your first EATAW conference. And it's great to see that community which is holding together. We see each other. Perhaps we only see each other every 2 years. But a large number of people have walked through that door and said, John, so nice to see you. It's been 2 years, hasn't it? As we grow and establish ourselves as a community, something different starts to happen. Some of our members start to leave us. Many of you who have been with EATAW for a long time will remember Clive Lawrence. Clive has been a stalwart EATAW member, somebody who we may not always have agreed with everything that he said, but it was always a pleasure to debate it with him. Clive is dying. When I saw him not long ago, he said, initially, the doctors have given me until summer. It was the choice between the EATAW conference and my son's wedding. I hope you don't mind if I don't join you this year. But more recently, I spoke to Clive, and he said, well, the treatment's gone very well. Now they're looking maybe, I can be around till September, October. Got lots of positive plans. And I'm sure that if there are any of you who know Clive, he'd be very pleased if you get in touch and wish him well and have a chat with him. But so that, I think, reminds us that we come together every 2 years and we see each other, and you think people are going to be there, and you think, I'll see you in 2 years. Well, you never know, they might not be, so stay in touch. This is the opportunity that we have to build those contacts with people who work in the same area as us, and to maintain those contacts, and to learn from each other, both here and in future. So seize that opportunity. Make the most of the time that you have in the next 3 days. As Thich Nhat Hanh would say, now is the most important moment in your life. And I'm sure Clive would agree with him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I realize I forgot to introduce myself earlier. Sorry about that. My name is Silke Platzek. I'm co-chair of the EATAW 2017 Organizing Committee. And Rob mentioned earlier the Center for the Development of Academic Skills, which I head up at Royal Holloway. When the Organizing Committee first started planning this conference about 15 months or so ago, we thought about the key aspects that would make this conference successful. We tried to define the term success, and as we often do these days, or are forced to do these days, we try to measure or anticipate the number of delegates we'd like to achieve, or the number of sessions we'd like to run, or the number of speakers we hoped to attract. But standing here today, I realize it's not about the metrics, it's not about the how manys of this world. It is about you, the delegates that are here today, the speakers, and the people who have traveled from the UK, Europe, or beyond to attend sessions, to network, to meet new faces, to reconnect with familiar faces. And it'll be you who will determine ultimately whether this conference has done its job. As John said, EATAW is all about building communities of practice, developing new knowledge, sharing experiences, and facilitating collaborative endeavor. And I sincerely hope, as I stand here again in 3 days' time giving my closing remarks, that I will be able to say that this conference has been a success. I welcome you all today, and to help you navigate and make the most of the conference, I'd like to now run through a few logistics to help you benefit as much as you'd like to benefit from being here. Firstly, I'd like to start, and you will see their tables outside on the ground floor. If you have a moment, please do have a chat or visit their tables. I'd like to thank the the sponsors that have made this conference possible. In terms of the organizing committee, I've introduced myself. You have a photo here of everybody involved. We are easily identifiable in that we have yellow name badges. If you need to get hold of us with a query or a comment, please do get in touch. We have Larissa from the left, Katie, Sophia, me, Stuart and Matthew. Please approach us if there's anything you'd like to ask. In terms of getting in touch, if you need any help, you will have seen the registration desk already, the reception desk where you have picked up your lanyards and your name badges. We're open from 8:30 till 5. So again, any questions to do, be it with the app, be it with logistics, be it with your sessions if you're down to be a speaker, do get in touch. Alternatively, you can get hold of us either through the app. You can see the little phone icon in the top right-hand corner where you will have access to the main contact details. Alternatively, in your program book, which hopefully all of you will have picked up, on page 10 are key phone numbers if you need to reach us. For the conference app, and I do hope that many of you have downloaded it, found it easy to use, and are making active use of it. If not, please speak to reception desk. Any problems with using the app, please, again, speak to reception desk. If you're not sure what's on the app and you're considering whether to use it, inside the conference program, there's an overview of the main functions if you're not sure whether it's worth your while. I believe it is, so please do have a look at it. The app will be the main platform we're going to use to announce any schedule changes, to announce any sort of changes to the social program, room changes, etc. Alternatively, there will also be projectors outside, so do keep an eye out for projectors because there will be messages throughout the conference about the social program, about any changes, etc. It keeps moving me on to the two conference rooms. We're in the Windsor building, as hopefully all of you know. Not all of the sessions will be in this building. We will have some sessions, most of the sessions here, but also if you go out of the building, turn right and walk down the road a little bit, you will see a dome-shaped building, and that's the Moore building. So if you're interested in any sessions in the Moore building, and the Moore Annex is right behind it, please do go out of this building, turn right. For this evening, for both the lightning talks and the barbecue, we will be in the Founders building, and hopefully there is signage guiding you, despite the building works happening, to Crosslands, where the little green square is that you can see here. In Crosslands, we will hold the lightning talks later, but also we will have entertainment, music, etc. In terms of the conference program, you will have seen from the program schedule that there are 10 minutes between sessions, and that is to allow you to move between rooms, move between sessions, and please feel free to do so and make use of those 10 minutes. Please be seated just prior to the session so the session chair can get started promptly and finish promptly as well. For Monday evening, as I mentioned, the barbecue and the entertainment and the lightning talks will be here. You will have spotted, hopefully, in your schedule that there's a little R in the bottom right-hand corner, and that applies to a number of sessions, and they are the sessions that are going to be recorded. So if you can't be physically present, despite you maybe wishing to, look out for them on the conference website. They will be there, hopefully within 24 hours of being recorded. So do look out for the little R's if you're unable to attend something. The lightning talks, as mentioned, this evening at 6 o'clock in Crosslands, and if I could ask presenters to turn up for 5:30 by 5:30 to help set up your presentations. As part of the lightning talks, we will have the South Quad open, where the barbecue will be, where we will have music, we will have Morris dancers, lawn games, a quiz, and lots of other, hopefully lots of fun and opportunities for delegates to meet each other. There's also a cash bar, and I'm told they'll stay open for as long as needed tonight for those that are here. Tomorrow then, a few words about plans for tomorrow. Again, hopefully you will have seen in the schedule there's a poster session in rooms 002 and 003, which are kind of next door. You will see that posters are being set up or have all been set up already. The posters will be on display throughout, but the actual poster presenters will be by their posters on Tuesday and available for any queries or discussions that you might like to have with them between 1:20 and 1:50. After the poster session, there will be a Q&A panel, starting at 3:30 back in the auditorium. If you'd like to submit any questions for the panel to discuss tomorrow, please either submit them through the app, or there's a box by the reception desk, please, and there are slips of paper there as well. Please do write your question down, and questions will be selected tomorrow lunchtime. The panelists that we have invited are all three keynote speakers. We have David Russell, hopefully giving us a US perspective. We have a PhD student, Stephen Thurlow, who's flown in from Australia, and so we'll hopefully get an Australian and student perspective from him. And over there, we've got our own organizing committee member, Stuart Wrigley, who will also be part of the panel. Following the Q&A panel discussions, for those of you that are EATAW members, there will be a general assembly and election meeting starting at 4:30, again, back in this room. If you haven't looked at the profiles of the 8 candidates standing already, please do so. We have printed copies along the stairwell outside room 005. Alternatively, the profiles are all on the website if you are interested in having a look and coming along tomorrow. It looks like it completes my presentation, but I've got a few housekeeping or further housekeeping issues I've been asked to mention by colleagues of mine. You will have seen that the construction outside is still underway, unfortunately. We were hoping that would all be done, but I am told it'll be done in time for graduation, which starts on the 10th of July. So many apologies. We hope that there won't be any disruption inside this building. There shouldn't be any noise, etc., coming in from the building works, and I thank you for your understanding. For lunches and coffee breaks, we have serving stations both on the ground floor and on the first floor. Look out, there should be both for the coffee, for example, starting at 10:30, as well as the lunches. There should be 2 serving stations downstairs, 2 serving stations upstairs, to help manage the number of people that will be keen to have drinks at 10:30, for example. Crosslands is not just open tonight, it'll be open throughout the conference, so tomorrow evening or Wednesday evening if you're staying till then. And a couple of last things. Fire exit. If for some reason we need to vacate this building, please exit the building there, go in a counterclockwise direction, go across the road to the grassy area opposite, should there be an issue here with fire. Hopefully there won't be. And washroom facilities are again on both levels of this building, so please do look out for toilets on this level as well as upstairs. Now, having gone through all of these logistics and housekeeping issues, I'd like to move on to our first plenary speaker, Professor Rowena Murray. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Rowena. She joins us from the University of the West of Scotland, where she is a professor in education and director of research in the School of Education. She's also a principal fellow of the UK Higher Education Academy. Rowena holds a master's from Glasgow University and gained a PhD from Pennsylvania State University, where she also taught rhetoric and composition. In addition to academic writing, Rowena's main teaching interests lie in areas such as thesis writing, writing for publication, and research supervision, whilst many of her publications have focused on different audiences, ranging from postgraduate and research students to early career academics and PhD supervisors. She has written numerous articles and books on academic writing, such as How to Write a Thesis, Writing for Academic Journals, The Handbook of Academic Writing, co-authored with Sarah Moore, as well as Writing in Social Spaces. In awarding Rowena the status of Principal Fellow, the UK Higher Education Academy has recognised the significant leadership that Rowena has brought to the promotion of teaching excellence in higher education, as well as her impact at strategic level. Today's keynote is entitled, "What do we do about policy? Not just a rhetorical question." And in it, Rowena aims to address the question of engaging with university policy makers on the value of teaching academic writing, the discourses to explore, and how to effectively demonstrate the vital role that the teaching of academic writing plays as part of university life. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rowena and ask you to welcome her to the front of the auditorium. Professor Rowena Murray.
Get my presentation up while I just check the microphones work. Can you all hear me okay? Is this thing on? Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. That's it. That's slides. Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning. I'd like to congratulate the organising committee for getting us all here at this time. I'm delighted to be here myself, and I'm looking forward to meeting and chatting to various people I know, people I don't know. I'd like to congratulate them on the excellent weather. Those of you who've noticed my picture in the conference programme will note that that's how you dress for the Scottish summer. So this is a pleasure. This is a pleasure. So this is my topic. I was kind of asked to focus. I've written a lot about academic writing, but I was asked to focus on policy today for this talk. It's not something I've written very much about, so it was really good for me to try and think through what I might say today. And I think that makes me the perfect example of what we need to do a bit more of, is that I have not really thoroughly developed this area, maybe in my work, and maybe that's something I could be doing more of. So that might be the starting point. There is obviously a body of evidence and a body of expertise in this room and everywhere, actually, in academic writing. We know that we've established that academic writing is part of learning, These things are well established now. That learning about academic writing is the foundation for so many learning outcomes and learning processes. It's my view that that's all thoroughly established in many different ways, to be honest, in our different countries. But who knows about this body of evidence? This is me, by the way, hiding behind my body of evidence, my books, and I'm surrounded by, I don't know if you can see, other people's books as well. So I have read other people's books. This is not just all about my books. But who knows? The key question for this morning is, for this session, is who knows about the body of evidence that we know so well and that we've built? And how is that body of evidence being used? So these would be the first two questions I'd like to raise. We all have expertise, you all have expertise and profile in this field of academic writing. But sometimes academics don't really kind of get it, I'll talk later about things that have been said to me about, so you write academic writing about academic writing? Is this ringing any bells? Really interesting, but a bit strange. And leaders in higher education, I'm not going to try very hard not to name names here, but leaders don't always like the sound of it. It's that remedial tag that gets tagged, and they're like, what are you really doing here? And thirdly, even my friends, when I go to the dentist and they say, what is it you do, what are you a professor of? And I'm like, academic writing, and they go, what? So it's not entirely established as a field among even people down the pub. Certainly dentists and doctors, so people you meet in the train, it's established for us, this field, and maybe not so much for further afield. A lot of my work recently has been on writing retreats, social writing groupings, where academics and PhD students can develop their writing habits and develop conversations about writing. and thereby achieve lots of outputs for research assessment, but lots of other benefits and lots of other good outcomes as well. A lot of people who've been to these retreats are now innovating in their teaching of undergraduate classes as well, like dissertation writers, for example. So this is all kind of rolling into other corners of the curriculum as well. You can see I'm wearing the Penn State t-shirt. This is me on the left-hand side here. This looks like a little space here for you if you want to come to writing retreat. There's coincidentally your space. It's not set up the way, but it looks like that. So Penn State would be where my first education in teaching and learning using academic writing, really rhetoric and composition as we would call it there. And this is Beaver Stadium on the left and Old Main on the right. Coincidentally, when I first went to the States, I worked in Wilson College for 2 semesters as a volleyball coach. And Chambersburg, where Wilson College is, believe it or not, 2 miles from a town called Scotland. Unbelievable. So there are many Scottish connections here, whether you like them or not, in this narrative. But at Penn State, there's a scale thing that we don't, in any university I've worked in, we don't compete with, don't attempt to really. There were actually more seated, there was 107,000, but they brought it back down again for safety reasons or something. But there's a lot of students, and all undergraduate students, as I'm sure many of you know, all undergraduate students would do a writing course, or in my day, 2 writing courses. I've checked the website recently, and there are obviously differences from when I did it. But the key theme is that this is the requirement, that undergraduate students would learn about writing, and then they could do a 200 or 300 level course related to their discipline or related to their profession. And as a graduate student, a PhD student in the Department of English, there's a very good composition unit. That was just pure luck. I wasn't seeking that out. But if I hadn't gone there to do my PhD, I wouldn't know about any of this stuff, actually. And I certainly wouldn't have had the desire to come and bring some of this stuff back to Scotland and the UK and to other places I've worked. So you would teach rhetoric and composition, but we were also trained to teach it properly, which was a bit of a shock to my system, I can tell you. But hey-ho. That's education. So these are the things I use to tell my PhD students how lucky they are, really, that they don't have to do half of this stuff. Particularly 2 foreign languages back in the day was quite a big ask for people, Americans actually, who wouldn't traditionally back then have studied foreign languages at all. So it's a shocking list of testing experiences, but it was a thorough and excellent education. And this would be the rhetoric and composition curriculum that I would have taught back in the day. And I'm conscious as I'm saying this, that this is when I was doing my PhD, probably before many of you were born, actually. I'm thinking, as I was thinking of saying that, I'm thinking maybe before your parents were born, actually. Conferences are shocking for this kind of stuff. Anyway, so we would look at the 2 courses, English 15 and English 30, would have been, on the left-hand side, modes of exposition, so expository writing, and the right-hand side, modes of argument. So they would all do papers in this, they would have seminars on it, and so on and so forth. Can I just check, is everybody understanding my Scottish accent timeout? Is everybody okay? Is that okay? Right, I apologise to the Scots in the audience for making it, it's a little bit American as I speak to an international audience. It's a little bit Andy Murray, you know, no relation, but yeah, some people hate that in Scotland, but hey-ho, it's international. So these would have been the things I'd been teaching as I was doing all this other stuff that you saw in the previous slide. Compared to when I was an undergraduate at Glasgow University, I'm going to show you what this says, but just to show you the picture of the feedback that I would have got on an honours essay at Glasgow University. And I'm not trying to slag them off. I got a good education there as well, and it's a very good university. But that would have been my writing development as I got feedback on that essay. So it's just to show the contrast. And this is what the feedback said. I'm not even reading the words as a student. I'm just looking at the mark. I'm like, A, double minus? What the? So I'm trying to work out 2 minuses? You know.
It's a C thing.
It's what? It's the same. A C. Of course it is. Thankfully, I didn't know that at the time. And To be honest, this is spot-on feedback, actually, because that would have been my tendency, maybe still is my tendency, you might think, by the end of this talk. It's like another thing and another thing and another thing. The fact that it's called my prevailing sin is kind of interesting, actually, but, or maybe not. And I had very similar feedback on one of my papers at Penn State, you know how you do papers in your graduate seminars, and Stanley Weintraub, who's an enormous scholar, not enormous scholar, a scholar of enormous output at Penn State, focusing on Shaw. I think it was a seminar on George Bernard Shaw, and he says something very similar in his feedback. He is, or was, such an efficient kind of graduate seminar runner, because he's so busy doing all these books, that he just wrote a paragraph on your paper, which apparently he did on the plane to his next, port of call, his next conference. But it was a similar point. They said, you've set many hairs running here, and you really need to focus on one and kind of focus on that, develop that. So again, I don't really want to slag off Glasgow University or the person who will remain nameless who gave me this feedback, but it didn't compare with the education that undergraduates were getting at Penn State. That's the point. Didn't compare at all. And also, I mean, the essay I would have written to get that feedback, I would have written the night before. So the writing practices, the writing processes were deeply horrible, but I was getting really good marks. But if the essay were due on a Friday before I had a volleyball match on the Saturday, it would also affect my volleyball. That's me in the middle there, beating the block. Those of you who know volleyball, which is actually most people out with the UK, the block is meant to form, and I am so fast and so high, I'm beating the block. But I've kind of used that as a metaphor for my career, and those of you women in academic careers will know what I mean there, but it actually affected my whole life. So the idea of retreating to write, I had the knowledge I got at Penn State, and then getting people to retreat is trying to get the writing configured into something a bit healthier, more paced, and then this is where I start working for the tourist board in Scotland, Bonnie Pictures of Scotland, retreating to some of our lovelier spaces, getting out of campus to make some changes. And I guess the question for this keynote is, okay, we're not going to talk about all the stuff I've done with retreats. Really, I'm raising the question of, can we do retreats, well, can we convert that into policy work, the stuff, the knowledge we have about that? But also, can we do some policy work? I mean, I'm actually thinking about one of our next retreats should focus on doing some policy work and some policy writing, because I think that's a bit of a gap in certainly our work in my group. Seba has argued there are certain things we actually failed to do in terms of making an impact on policy. So I don't know if you feel you already actually, by the way, do some of that, or maybe we do a little bit of it, but I guess for today, the question I'd like to raise is, should we be doing more of these activities? And it is maybe a different way of thinking about the knowledge base and the profile that we already have. The SRC, which is a research council in the UK, but there's lots of this kind of stuff around, just for example. And they suggest checking UK Parliament websites. As you can tell by the tone of my voice, that's something I don't really want to do, but certainly not something I do. Maybe I should do it more. And the point of that would be to find out MPs have expressed an interest in my area. I'm thinking already, it's unlikely, that even the dentist and my friends down the pub are not expressing an interest in my area. What are the chances? Anyway, I should check. And this last one, as I was rehearsing this with various people, one of them said, well, how many MPs are interested in academic writing? Thank you for that. Like, open laughter, there you go. So it's on us, though, to kind of make that connection rather than make it a bit of a joke, I suppose. And then there are think tanks. So there's government, local, national, federal, whatever government, and think tanks. And here there may be a little bit of an angle for us, looking for new, novel ideas. I think the word radical is used in that, on that page as well. So maybe there is a bit of an avenue here for us to explore, and I would argue develop a bit more. So we're back to retreats, because I'm going to interpolate all the things I'm saying with I think I'm going to have to do this at Writing Retreat. I think we're going to have to, because Writing Retreat lets us focus on the writing task, but in discussions with others, and it's that kind of focus I think I need to give to policy work, policy writing. Just a wee update on Writing Retreat. Sorry, we had to, when I've been working in Japan, I'm very conscious of not using any Scottish words and hardly any Scottish pronunciation. So I said to them at one point, I said, right, let's have a wee break. And I went, so I said to them, do you know what "we" means? And they're on their devices going, "we." Does it mean we can go to the toilet? And I'm like, yeah. And one of them said, does it mean we can have a wee game of bowling on the Wii or something? So it's different definitions. But "we" means small. Here's a small update, brief update on stuff. So we're trying to widen access to retreats, widen access to research assessment at my university by running writing retreats every month. And the director of research invested several thousand pounds in attracting more people than have currently already been to retreats. Larissa Kempenaar and I have been writing about a systems approach. We've just published 2 papers in higher education research and development and studies in higher education. It helps us identify what's needed and what's missing in writing development for academics, but some of that I think can be applied to student work as well, student writing. And I've got a new website just to say that instead of rowenamurray.org, there's Anchorage-education. So all the stuff I'm not talking about today will be there. I'm not going to say an awful lot about the writing retreats. Given there are these variations, not everybody can get to a writing retreat. So in my work, if you're familiar with it, years ago, I said, well, the retreats are so good and so great, and we cannot bring that back to campus. Actually, now we've established we can. We can bring these behaviors and processes and benefits back to campus environments in these variations. And we now have HEA, I don't know if you all know the Higher Education Academy, which you mentioned that I'm a principal fellow. Nobody manages to find time to write. They write maybe their papers, and the higher education fellowship writing falls off everybody's agenda, falls off the back burner into that greasy space behind the cooker. It's not even on the back burner. So we've had to configure retreats for that purpose as well. And you'll have other things that you could do that too. I don't know if you remember Mayrath's paper back in 2008. It was quite a groundbreaking thing. If we're going to write about policy, we need to get away from wheels and gears of modern bureaucracies. Does that ring a bell? All this stuff, all the distractions. And I don't know if you've seen Helen Sword's book, just out. She's got a new book on what successful academic writers do, just come out, I think, last month. So these are potential sound bites, is how I'm putting these statements up now. If we're thinking about catching the eye of policy makers, I'm just sort of playing a bit with what would be some key messages that might interest policy makers, well as ourselves. And how would we put them in which words would we actually use? So highly productive academic writers disengage regularly from other tasks in order to write. So that's quite a nugget of information. It's database study, so there are interviews with experienced writers that Mayrath did. And Sword has developed this BASE model, B-A-S-E, behavioral, bless you, you're allergic to BASE models. Behavioral, artisanal, which means the craft of writing, social, which is what I've written about a lot lately, and emotional, which is kind of interesting and often left off the agenda. I'm struggling to think about policymakers being interested in the E part, the emotional part, but maybe they would be. And we would have to then, it's on us to identify policymakers, be they governments, think tanks, senior officers, who already have expressed an interest in, if we're following the ESRC advice, who already has expressed an interest in any of these issues. And therefore, can we feed them some of this information, either in this forum or some other forum? This is just to show you that people write so much you can't even capture the picture of their hands. They're moving so fast. It's a blur, okay? But back to retreat as the venue where I think we're going to develop this stuff. I wanted to talk a little bit more about disengagement, and maybe there are some messages here for policymakers, maybe there's some messages here for us as writing developers. I've written about this in the paper that I think Stuart tweeted about, it's not a hobby. Academic writing is not a hobby. And maybe that's a soundbite as well, actually. It's not a hobby. It's an interview-based study as well. So the need for physical disengagement for academics, and maybe for others as well, to do academic writing. Often academic writing is done outside of working hours. You know, that's not feasible for every academic if they have kids and other caring and other responsibilities. So physically disengaging is very much what we do at writing retreats. And I'm pressing this because I think it's a lifeline for many academics, particularly. And if we're going to get to academics who are then going to innovate in terms of using writing in their teaching, we have to maybe help them with making time for their own writing. So I'm seeing this as a kind of chain of events, really. And that's why I feel it's important just to flash up this image of people concentrating on their own writing and finding ways to help students with their writing. Social disengagements, we had physical, social. Having an immediate community of people all tackling similar challenges and usually willing to share their struggles. So I'm kind of today sharing, I don't know if it's struggle as much as avoidance of writing to policymakers, but this is about creating an environment or using an environment that we've already created to develop, to do some policy work, to do some more policy work than we've currently done. And this will be familiar to any of you who've done research in academic writing. But I wanted to flash this up because of the words care less. I don't know if you're hearing this, but from academics that I work with at retreats and elsewhere, excuse me, I'm hearing more and more, they're like, I don't care. I'm just not doing that anymore. I just don't care anymore. People are at the point of not just overburdened with work, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are saying, well, people who genuinely care about their students' learning and do want to innovate, but have these blocks. Remember I was saying beating the block? There have been blocks being put in their way in terms of, well, you can't do that innovation, you can't do this until you go there, and you can't do that until you go here. All sorts of blocks being put in people's way in terms of, as academics, innovating in teaching and learning in a way that would provide some writing development and all that that involves, are beginning to just say, I don't care, and to kind of emotionally, I don't know, walk away from the potentially other various agendas, but certainly the writing development agenda. So I find that quite worrying, but I think that's something we need to take into account. And that's another strong argument for the writing retreats. They get to writing retreats, and we can turn that around. They can get their publications done, they can think about the innovating, they can work together and so on. So it's not all through me, it's the community of writers that help each other. And I think unless we continue to provide these retreats, that care less thing. I mean, you can see what it's about here. It's about reprioritizing, but there's a more intense thing happening in a lot of academics I meet, and not just at my university, but at other universities as I go around the UK and different countries I work in. We also do a training for retreat facilitators, so that's me again trying to kind of press this model of working, survival, you know, achieving and thriving, surviving and thriving. And the last part is the maybe hardest to achieve, the hardest form of disengagement for people to achieve, cognitive disengagement. And I have this last point from a lot of younger people, much younger than me. Everybody's younger than me, probably in the room, actually. But they say, you know, I say, well, if you come to writing retreats, it contains writing-related anxiety. And there was I was working in Switzerland at one point, and there was a young person who said, no, if I were to unplug from social media and all of that stuff, I would be more anxious. So I'm saying unplug in order to focus on writing, and that contains writing-related anxiety. He said, no, I'd be more anxious because I'd be out of touch with everybody and I wouldn't know what was going on. So much so that he ran out of the room afterwards and said, no, I really mean it, you know, after the session was over. So we're aware of this, the fear and anxiety, and I'm sure you fully understand what that's about, but just that's another factor. So I'm not trying to idealize, because it's still a complex process, but it's maybe a venue where we can work on policy. Yeah, so there are, you know, it's not the dark side as such, but there are potential effects, and maybe that's where, when we've done workshops and writing retreats every month. I think some of that goes away, although you still have to fight for funding, and that's a whole other story I'm not going to get into today. But there are these kind of downsides as well, and if we only did writing retreat as a one-off, then the effect goes away quite quickly. So we need to do this continuous program of helping people develop their own writing, produce their own written outputs, and then academics will have time, space, the motivation actually to work on students' writing. I have to be very careful how I say this. More institutional support for the fact, act, and art of writing. There, I said it okay without making a mess of it. So we need institutional support, and we need to keep, I guess, making the case for institutional support. In the 4.5 years I've been at the University I'm at just now, the University of the West of Scotland, I would have had to make that case, and this won't surprise you, in numerous ways, and haven't always succeeded making the case for writing retreats. And these are producing research assessment outputs. You're like, how hard can it be? You know, we're producing outputs, we're producing KPIs. We're getting research, you know, the HA fellowships written, and still there's, you know, various blocks. So there's something that we still have to kind of overcome, and work that I would still have to do in persuading those in charge of funding that this is an important activity, even when it's achieving outcomes that they value. So I've written about community of practice over the years, but I wanted to kind of take a bit of a turn it around a little bit here. I've written particularly in the paper Murray and Newton, 2009, about these 3 components of communities of practice. And obviously I argue that writing retreats create communities of writing practice at the retreat, but also beyond the retreat, and also spilling into other activities. Like there's now a team of people preparing people for vivas, for PhD examinations, the oral defense of the PhD, and doing other things. So there's a sort of spin-off that we should try and capture as well from the retreats. Anyway, community of practice to some extent does fit this work, and that's the kind of key argument of that paper. Oh, this is our retreat venue. It looks a bit Bates Motel at the minute, but it's actually lovely. So this is the Gartmore Black Bull Hotel. And it's the cake capital of Scotland, all right? So you'll see lots of pictures. There'll be quite a lot of food porn in the next few minutes. I'm going to show you pictures of cake just by way of, just, you know, because otherwise it's relatively wordy. And I was doing this, and I also have written a lot, I don't know if you know, about snack writing, and about writing in shorter increments of time, like 90 minutes rather than 10-hour days. And there was somebody I was talking at a conference, and she said, actually, in the public session, she asked me, that's a right question, she said, do you have a problematic relationship with food? And I went, look at me, no. So just to reassure you, I don't, I'm okay, all right, but to be honest, these big cakes come out at the end of the retreat, and I generally am like so full up, I have to take a slice home because they're so fantastic though, they're event cakes. So cake capital of Scotland, that's the point. But mutuality of engagement, in this little study we did, funded by the British Academy or Nuffield Foundation, yeah, you're there with other people. It's kind of clear that there is mutuality of engagement going on at writing retreats and in other spin-off meetings and moments. More cake, there we go. However, what I'm finding is, going back to campus and more, as I said, as hinted at earlier, is demutualized engagement, actually. All right, you've done your mutualizing, and we're just going to kind of stamp on it, actually. And the quote I've had, this is, and again, I'm trying not to specify an institution, because I think this kind of thing is said a lot in different ways. What you have to do, Rowena, is step back and see the strategic view, the big picture. And I'm like, what I'm saying is based on, is contextualized by, and what I'm saying about academic writing retreats at my institution, wherever that might be, is based on a perception of the big picture. So I have a sound vision of the big picture, but I'm being perceived as not, which is kind of, again, a warning flag for me in terms of how I'm communicating about this stuff that I know works. I know will deliver their targets, but they're still saying, oh, I don't think you've got the strategic view. Now that might be because the person wasn't listening to me anyway, in which case I need to learn to repeat myself a bit more. We don't really know why that person has said that, but I'm just saying there's this demutualizing. No sooner have I mutualized engagement, but there's this other stuff coming in to block it. Okay. So the question then for us, for you and me, is how do we re-mutualize in those conversations on paper, in the report in this conference, you know, as we go back and report on what we did and what we heard and what the implications are, removing all the caveats. Remember the ESRC saying, don't put in any caveats. How can we do that? Some of this stuff I do already, so there must be other stuff we need to do. The key performance indicators, the shared goals, the business spin-off. You know, we have an income stream and stuff, so we're doing all these things, and nevertheless, there is still work to be done with policymakers, be it institutional policy, national policy. The second component of communities of practice that I looked at was identity of participation. Seeing yourself as a writer, which ironically, people working in academic settings, it was one person in an interview said, works in the university, said, I feel I have to sneak writing in, you know, works in a university, have to sneak writing in, and maybe they feel they have to sneak writing into the curriculum as well, because there are blocks there too. So there are still these real barriers that I want to explore today, because they might give us solutions to, you know, answers to the questions of what should we do with policy, about policy now. Yeah, this is another great thing that was said to me quite recently, but I won't specify where. I was talking about academic writing, my profile. I might have been talking about coming here, actually. And this person said to me, don't be a guru. And I'm like, what? I don't aspire to be a guru, but you know, you've got a lot of knowledge about stuff, and you're speaking from that knowledge base. So, and probably for some people you are a bit of a guru, actually, although you might never have heard that said. You might have heard something else said. But this person was saying again, just, you know, don't be a guru. And I tried to imagine, you know, the people that invented, what's the helix, the double helix thing? Huxley. You know, can you imagine somebody saying to Huxley, not that my work compares with Huxley, okay, let's be clear about that, but, you know, don't bother with that helix thing. It's just, no, don't be a guru, you know. No, there are certain people to whom this would never be said, and I kind of know it's gendered, and I'm not going to go there either, but that's huge. And I'm putting together a book about what it's like to be a woman professor, an international book, so that hopefully will be out sometime in the next couple of years. Because we need to look at that, but maybe not today. Or maybe today, you can let me know. Because everything, okay, I'll stop. We know. Yeah, so don't be a guru. So this is somebody kind of not just blocking, but sort of, if it's a bad day, blocking your own kind of identity as an expert in academic writing. I'm like, and this is somebody I know I need to communicate well with about academic writing, and that's what he's saying to me. I'm like, God, have I ever failed to make, but again, maybe I just need to restate it, be persistent, you know, send them some writing, send them something else, or just ignore it. You know, again, that's a problem I need to solve if this is what's being said to me. Another excuse to show a picture of Scotland, by the way. So how can we kind of get them to re-identify, if, you know, identifying was the kind of component of communities of practice. Do we have to do the mutualizing first before we then do this? You know, in which order are we going to do these components of communities of practice? Because they're not coming to retreats. These policymakers, these senior officers, can you imagine, actually, if they did? No, maybe it'd be lovely. Maybe they'd be lovely. Maybe they would see it and go, yes, you've been right all along. Yeah. You are a guru. Congratulations. Be a guru. You have permission. You have my permission to be a guru. You can just imagine. So the third thing was this, which is key, obviously, if people are going to be moving into our field, if you like, is partly what I'm seeing academics is doing some work in academic development, academic writing development, rather. And looking to learn. And academics are actually, as I'm sure you know, are looking to learn about writing and thinking about how the stuff they've learned, how they can help students benefit from this knowledge about academic writing as well. But what's happening in my experience is the delegitimizing. Some years ago, it was said to us, we were in kind of academic development broadly, and I'm still doing this thing of academic writing, and it was said, this is not, what you're doing is not research, it's scholarship. Now, on any given day, I think we'd be happy to have that debate about research and scholarship, but you know that's a put down, right? It's like the researchers are there, and what you do is down here, okay? And I'm sure you've heard things like this before, but I'm saying, well, I'm now calling it something. I'm calling it delegitimizing. And peripheral, this is going to be hard to say, peripheralizing? No, didn't say it right. You know what I mean. That word at the end there, peripheralizing. There we are. And so communities of practice says, you know, the approximation of practice is practice. And they're like saying, no, it's not. You know, you're not practicing research. So again, I'm thinking we need to get to a venue where we can think about refocus on re-legitimizing. When you already know that this is legitimate and you are legitimized, re-legitimizing with, already it's a bit us and them, isn't it? With policymakers, whatever that means. And a bonny picture of the Falls of Clyde, just in case you're a bit worried about losing sight of Scotland. And I guess just because we just have to glance in the direction of whose community we're talking about. The writing retreats are people who kind of buy into it, develop writing skills, take it back to the campuses, whatever. But in terms of the policymakers, which community, do they even get the word community, actually, community of practice? We were told not to have a caveat, but hey ho, for the sake of balance, I'm an academic, what can you do? Here's a caveat. Maybe a couple of recent papers, not so much critiquing writing retreats, but saying, are you sure about this? You know, just a little bit of a warning about, are we just a paper factory here? And other pressures we're bringing to bear on participants, or the same pressures. So I take these on board as well, and these are important points to think about too. Discourses, are there very different discourses that they write and they run from the ones that we run and write? I mean, I've just sketched that out there. You'll have a different model, I'm sure, in your setting. But we need to kind of analyze, as we would if we were doing rhetorical analysis, you know, what are the audience needs? And I think we do that perfectly well for many audiences, actually. Thank you very much. But maybe we need to focus on doing some of that work, or a bit more of that work with policymakers. I'm not trying to implicitly critique anybody's work in that area. There is work in that area, including my own, but the question for this morning is how can we do that more? And we're quite good at this, rhetorical analysis. We're experts in rhetoric to some extent, or a great extent actually. So that should not be the hard part. It's applying these skills. And also making sure you get plenty of cake while you're doing it. Yeah. Just perfectly, ideally, you can see the book on the right. I don't know if you can see the book on the right. It says, Achieving Impact in Research. Sorry, Achieving Impact in Research. I should say that bright and cheerily. So, yes, I mean, that book obviously is part of our discussion. This was a retreat where we developed research proposals, so we had this to hand. Churchman has also written about the community idea. So again, this might be a prompt for us in writing policy to policy, writing back to policy. How do we represent what we do, what you do in text, talk, and symbolic and signifying practices? Not just in cake, because they're not really interested in the fact that you eat a lot of cake. So that just goes out the window right away. Talk, text, symbolic practices, signifying practices. So that's a bit of an agenda for us to talk about how we currently do that. How do we represent what we do to policy, whatever that means, in talk, in text, in symbolic practices, in signifying practices? How do we do that? We probably wouldn't even use these terms. Sorry, in Scotland, terms is 2 syllables. We probably wouldn't even use these terms in talking to policy. I do apologise, but hey-ho. I think you know what I mean. And I wondered if I could put these in your agenda as well as potential hot topics or buttons to press. That's the right term. These are topics that policymakers are likely to be already interested in. And I guess it's on you to find out, okay, the specific person I'm thinking of as policy person, has he or she recently stated an interest in any of these? So it's not just I know they're likely to be interested in, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's like, have they recently, has that person, that named person, recently expressed in text or talk an interest, particularly in a public way, so it's not just he or she's been chatting to you, but that's useful too. Have they expressed an interest in academic writing or any of the associated issues and some of this stuff as well? So that's on the agenda. And Wenger, as you well know, I'm sure, the originator of, with Lavie and so on, Communities of Practice Work, and more recent book on the topic as well, has this very sobering but useful reminder that as we're developing communities of practice, it's not an achievement, that's it, it's done, it's sorted, it's there, it's fixed. There will be, you know, the demutualizing moments, there will be the peripheralizing moments, and just to say, well, we know now that that's part of the community of practice model experience, that's part of our experience. And okay, is the answer just to be persistent? No, it has to kind of be more than that. I think we maybe need to do more rhetorical analysis and actually track more what the policymakers are saying. And I know, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that already, what policymakers are saying, but it's really maybe drilling down a little bit and saying, right, okay, if that's what they're saying now, what can we do to connect with that, to provide them with some information that they will find useful now, maybe not next year, maybe not last year, but now. What information would they find useful now that I have? This was sent to me by a colleague. I'm still relatively in touch with Penn State, so obviously it's one of the ways in which I keep calm, and I recommend the website to you. But Morag Thau, who's here today, and I have written about peer formativity. So we were trying to not neutralize performativity because it's there, and nor trying to reinvent it. We're trying to say the work we're doing in academic writing development is about doing that through peer relations. And to be honest, maybe some of the people who are coming to retreats, maybe I need to get them to do some policy work as well. Because these people, some of them have quite senior roles. So it's not all on me, it's not all on you to do this policy work. There is a peer formativity function, and maybe we need to, you all and I need to calm this potential friction, this potential us and them. Maybe we need to find a rhetoric that calms that a little bit, cuts it off at the pass, whatever metaphor you like. This potential friction between surveillance and non-surveillance, or free writing. I'm like, what's the point of doing bad writing? And you know, the actual benefits that ELBO has established, the free writing in various teaching and learning settings. Are you roasting? Is it roasting here? So I've come back to this image of me beating the block, not just to show you how high I can jump, or could jump a long time ago, actually, I should say. And I've been saying all along this morning that I think I'm trying to put a few items on your agenda for when you go back, but also for discussion at this conference. And we have another chance to discuss this stuff tomorrow, if you wish, at the panel. And Penn State is still there and thriving, so feel free to, if you need any connections there. But I'm sure many of you have American connections. Yeah, so maybe it's on me to speak to some of these people who, some are quite senior, some are quite connected. The training for retreat facilitators brought people from all over the place, all over the UK and Denmark and Italy, France, Italy. So, you know, people are coming, so maybe we can try and develop not just a network, but actually do some policy work and try and make it kind of in real time, rather than just saying, well, we ought to do more of that. Let's say, no, let's write some texts that we can produce, either talk text or written text, or some other way of influencing policy. Meetings we should be going to more. Yeah, and my key point would be to do, we're going to do some policy writing at retreats, and I'm going to bring in people who have roles in my university and at the training for retreat facilitators, other universities as well, and really focus on this problem. Maybe, I would say, not maybe, more than we have to date, to be honest. So, you are outstanding in your field. Although don't be a guru, obviously. And another picture of Scotland with the traditional, typical Highland coo, Heelan coo. This is one of many of these types of pictures of me as a professor, female professor. That's quite a typical picture, but some of these are good guys as well. Oh God, it's being filmed. Yeah. Just a wee joke. So the person in the middle I wanted really to highlight, Sir Harry Burns, was the former Chief Medical Officer for Scotland and is a fantastic, now he's making a contribution at Strathclyde University in Glasgow where I used to work. Sadly, they snapped him up before we got him, but we need to get him back. And he spoke as I was opening, the opening of my Centre for Research and Education. So he's a great guy that I got to through actually Dr. Morag Thau MBE. Because he's looking at, he started out as a surgeon, but he's actually become almost like a sociologist really, and looking at the ways in which people behave. So I was getting him to talk about community and behaviours and so on in relation to research and education. So I'll just spotlight him, he's a great guy. And we have great cattle and beef as well. So Scottish Tourist Board, I hope they're watching. So this is one of many groups. And I just wanted to say, you know, I think we do a lot of good work, which is absolutely, to put it politely, quite tiring. So I think the retreats are good for us to maintain our self-worth in this. You know, the dentist and the doctor and people in the pub may still not get it, but I think we need to make sure other academics on campus and other policymakers get what we do, that they do get it. So maintaining that profile, our values, our beliefs, our own health as well, because if you are, no matter how persistent you are, you know, on any given bad day, or if it gets a bit too hot, you know, you may feel, I just can't be bothered doing this, I don't care anymore. So it's to try and kind of see off that reaction that naturally comes when we're just trying to do too much and having to do it again. We're talking about changes in higher education, just chatting before this session. Has anybody had this experience where they're going to restructure this and it's kind of like what you did 10 years ago? And they go, this is a new thing, we need to do this. And it's on the tip of your tongue to say, well, how do you know that'll work? So where's your evidence base? And also, we did that 10 years ago, you told us to stop, you know. Now that's not what policymakers want to hear, but you know, it happens all the time. There's kind of nods of recognition about the place. So to kind of counteract the impact on our health of that kind of stuff and to build relationships that sustain us, the writing retreat model, and there are variations of that, as I've said, I think are even more important now than they were before. Last bonny picture of Scotland. This is actually in Orkney, where we don't currently write retreats, but there's no reason why we shouldn't run retreats. We should go there. But I mean, in this, just to conclude, in this session today, I've kind of told you there's a little bit of the dark narrative of, you know, demutualization. There's the blocks. There are the blocks. There's the dark side, really. This is the problem, within which writing retreats are absolutely necessary for a lot of academics and benefit students as well. So you've got the kind of negative. I've given you a bit of the negative picture and a bit of the positive. Which one do the policymakers want to hear? So just to raise that question, but on the other hand, when you're talking about a positive retreats, which I think, you know, to me the two are connected. This culture means that we absolutely have to do some of this stuff for ourselves as well as for our colleagues and the ongoing effects for students. But these two are completely different narratives and maybe different rhetorics as well. But as soon as you present a solution, I'm conscious that you're implying there is this problem that you've created. So I guess we need to be quite careful as we're proposing innovation rather than solutions even, that we don't implicitly critique, unless we intend to, of course, which is also fine. I'm not saying we never critique again. I'm not saying that. But just to say, I've given you two tracks here, the positive and the negative, and there are lots of positives coming out of the writing retreat work. And I thought, well, obviously you should all get on the train now and come to Scotland, and we'll do this policy writing retreat. And then I thought, no, wait a minute, we're here already. Here we are, we're unplugged, relatively speaking. We're roasting, but this is a venue for us. This is an opportunity for us to talk about these issues. And hopefully I've given you enough headings to talk about. I'm sure you have others as well, and please come up and tell me afterwards. But yeah, we're here, and this is one of the topics we probably should talk about. I know we're going to talk about lots of innovations and lots of work we're doing that's really important. But maybe we need to kind of just take a look over our shoulder as we're listening to that presentation or giving that presentation. Maybe we need to be saying, well, what are the implications here for policy? And I guess in those words I should conclude. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers.